and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig. We are so excited to have a special today with the author of a new book called Lean Out, Marissa Orr. She is so fascinating. She is really changing the cultural conversation we are having about women in the workplace, and that certainly has been out there. People are discussing women in the workplace. What got you to want to write this book, Lean Out? Because there was a book called Lean In, which is very different.
Yes. So when I worked at Google for 13 years, and shortly after Lean In was published, they came out with a host of programs aimed at their female employees to help them succeed. And I've always been really passionate about helping women, so I attended all of them. But after a while, I became a little bit discouraged because instead of really listening to all the women in the room and discussing like honest challenges and concerns, I felt like we were being lectured. And the subtext was we were being lectured on how to act more like men. So I decided to write my own perspective on the topic, and I started out as one presentation and it grew into a series of lectures. But really, the conversation's been dominated by a handful of women, and the perspective has been similar and limited, and so many working women don't hear their voices and challenges and concerns represented. So I really wrote the book to represent their voices and to tell a totally different side of the story to women at work.
What do you think corporate America wants women to act like? And I know you said like men, so what are the male or stereotypical male characteristics they want us to have?
Right. So I don't think it's necessarily a group of people desire people to act one way or the women to act one way or the other. I think by its very nature, corporations are zero-sum competitions. And it's behaviors like aggression, putting your needs ahead of others. These are the kinds of things that it takes in order to win. Now, these behaviors, as you know, cluster, they correlate more highly with men. They don't correlate more highly with competence. So I think really it's about, we've been trying to make women conform to what's required by the system instead of changing the system to better meet the needs of women.
And also, I think, meet the needs of men as well, because everyone is changing so drastically, and men have really been in the marketplace a lot longer than women. So it's really their playground in a way. And so women joined a little bit later in the game, and I think we're still finding our way. I really love how you talked about it was Sheryl Sandberg, right? And her writing Lean In. And there was really a backlash when her book came out. Like at first it was everybody wanted to lean in. And then I think Michelle Obama said, hey, leaning
it doesn't always work.
Yeah. But what's so interesting is that you met with Sheryl and you have a similar background.
Well, yes. So Sheryl and I grew up in the same neighborhood. Our houses were just a few blocks apart. We went to all the same grade schools. And she's 10 years older than me, so I didn't know her growing up, but it's a small neighborhood down there, so I know a lot of the same people. And then we both worked at Google and at Facebook. We both have a passion for helping women. But like I say, our paths might be somewhat parallel. Our trajectories couldn't be more different. So there's fundamental differences to who we are as people. I think we represent really dynamically opposite types of women, which is good. The more perspectives from different types of women, the better.
I agree. You reached out to Sheryl, and she agreed to meet with you. And was fascinated by you and your story, and in fact was taking notes, copious notes for her book. And that probably felt like such a turning point and milestone in your life, but yet it had a downside.
Yes, well, it depends how you look at it. So I wrote to Sheryl before I started Facebook because I was somewhat of a fangirl. And I had this dream of sort of meeting her and telling her about this lecture series that I started. So I thought about reaching out to her over the years because of the mutual connections, but I just didn't really have the courage. But I did once I started Facebook. And she was very gracious. She gave me 20 minutes of her time before she was taking the stage at our sales conference.
I have to say, on a personal note, I was so impressed with that because I would never meet with anybody before going on stage.
Oh, like, impressed with her, right?
Right?
Absolutely. She was so calm and professional and cool about it, which is, why she is where she is. And it was in the green room right before she took the stage. And like you said, we talked about some of the harder times in our life, and I was talking about what it taught me about perseverance and self-respect. And she asked if she could write it down because she felt it was powerful. And she was writing what then became option B at the time, which was her second book, and asked if I would be okay with having my story featured, which at the time, oh my gosh, it was like a dream. The reason that kind of things fell apart after that was only my second week at Facebook into my job there. And it was a really, unrelated to Sheryl directly, it was a bad experience. I was really bullied by a female executive there. It was just sort of one of these moments in your life where your identity, you question everything. And it ended up being a gift, though, because when I really did ask myself, who am I? What do I want? What is going on here? I knew that I needed to pursue my dream of writing this book and helping women. And so in the end, I really do think, objectively from the outside it was bad, but ultimately it was a gift.
The reason why I mention it is because the way you're a beautiful writer. And when I was reading your experience of being kind of bullied by this woman who clearly was threatened by you, it reads very much like a very well-written personal email, so it really drew me in. And I identified with it because in my experience, and I was not quite in corporate America, but I worked in hospitals and I worked in outpatient facilities, and I was always more in the patient realm. But, when you're working in a bureaucratic system, it's a bureaucratic system.
Right. And there's bullies everywhere.
And there's bullies everywhere. And that's why I just wanted to highlight it because in my experience, and I'm a woman's woman, like I believe in supporting women. I think we just get farther that way. I think it just works for everybody. But I found that it was sometimes the women and female bosses in the workplace that were the most psychologically damaging. And I just wonder where that fits into the conversation.
Does it? It's in a way, yes, and in a way, no. So what's been really amazing is that whole story of being bullied. That's the prologue to the book. So I go into a lot more details in the book about it. But what's so fascinating is so many women, after I speak to audiences about it or they read, because I posted the prologue online, they reach out to me saying that they so identified with that story because they've been in a similar position, kind of exactly what you said. And I think there's maybe this epidemic of emotional abuse that at work that women don't feel comfortable talking about. And one of the reasons is because when there's that female, we used to call it girl-on-girl crime, but when there's female aggression from one woman to another, it's so under the radar that it makes it hard to talk about because the victim sounds crazy. When you say, oh, she won't talk to me, it sounds like you're being petty. Right. And I think that's part of its power, right? Because it makes the victim feel really isolated.
One of the things that I have discovered over my research, just because I get curious about this topic, about power and how people handle power, especially in the workplace, is that women have a very different dynamic in terms of how they relate to one another. So it could be very intimate. So one moment we're talking about, I guess at the time, if you're young and single, boyfriends, husbands, kids, and then the next moment it can feel like a smack across the face when there's some work project that's being asked of in a hostile way. Whereas men tend to keep it more topical, so the wound is that much more significant, I think, when female bosses don't quite know how to handle their power. And of course there are wonderful female bosses out there. What does lean out mean to you? What are you hoping the takeaway will be for women in the workplace?
I hope that we start embracing women's needs in the workplace and trying to figure out, so let me back up for a second, because Lean In and most books of that nature, they pin the blame for the gender gap on stereotypes and cultural conditioning, and their prescriptions for success hinge on women acting more like men. But one of my fundamental beliefs is that men and women want different things at work, and that's okay. And instead of dismissing women's needs as a product of cultural oppression, I believe that we should listen to them, take them seriously, embrace them, and figure out what is it about the corporate structure that needs to change in order to better meet the needs of its female employees.
Do you have any theories about that? I have some theories.
Let's hear
one.
As
a working woman, I think it's too inflexible.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's why a lot of women take themselves out of the workplace for
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't want to work or don't want to have a working identity, but to have that intense structure is infantilizing. We can't have it when we're juggling kids. And I think if it was a kinder structure, more women would stay in the workplace and thrive.
So that's actually speaks right to one of the major themes in the book, which when I talk about the system is broken and not women, one of the big things I talk about is the system of reward and motivation. And also, actually, this one is probably more relevant, which is how we grade and assess people. We, you know, at large corporations, there's so many people around doing so many different things. It's really hard to tell who's doing a good job or who's doing any work at all. We end up grading on visibility instead of competence. So it's people that talk about the work the most and the loudest and are most self-aggrandizing and things like aggression, right?
Men are great at that.
Exactly. We interpret those things to mean that they're competent or doing good work or that they're leaders. And these things cluster more toward men. So what ends up happening is that men get recognized and rewarded more often even though they're not as competent. But how that relates to your question is that it ends up being a lot of politics and a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of BS, frankly. And especially when women have kids. I'm a single mom of 3. I wasn't less ambitious, but I had so much less patience for the BS and the politics because it's not enough to do good, meaningful, impactful work. It's more about how you package that. So one of my pet theories is that women don't have tolerance. They want to do actually more meaningful things rather than play these political games that are in some way kind of meaningless and in another way much more so the domain of men.
Yeah, I would agree with you. What do you think the answer is if we want to change the cultural impact and the cultural conversation? Do you think it's women not joining corporate America?
No, not necessarily. Okay. So one of the things is, and one of the big reasons I wrote this book is first we have to be honest because so many of the national conversations or the public discourse on women at work and the gender gap, it just lacks a real honesty to it. And we gloss over so many of the real challenges because I think a lot of women are afraid for good reason that their honesty about what their challenges is perceived as weakness. So when we want, you know,
or
more,
do you think it's perceived as complaining or gossiping or being weak?
Yeah, especially if we're dismissing all of that as a product of culture, then yes, right? Yeah. Because if we say, we don't want that promotion, because we're women, we're not leaning in, we have to move, we have to move through our fear and we have to go for it. It glosses over any other valid concerns, which then are interpreted as complaining. So I think we have to be honest about it. We have to get honest with ourselves. So a lot of times when at Google, I was really working very hard for a promotion. I didn't get it, and then realized, well, I didn't really want it anyway. I just wanted money and compliments and to have a great, not a great time at work, but to have meaningful relationships and do meaningful work.
Why wouldn't you want to have a great time
right.
at work? I mean,
yeah.
I do.
So I think part of it, the first step is being honest about it, and that's what I hope to accomplish with this book, is to give women a language that helps them be honest about what they're thinking and feeling.
I think it's so great, and I love how you say this is real advice. You are a single mother of 3. You're not this billionaire who's in a bubble kind of speaking to women from the top of this mountain that, quite frankly, most women can't relate to.
Yeah.
You made a decision to create your own path, even though it was not the easy decision to make.
Not at all. Yes, I think that makes it somewhat more relatable. I also think, though, that it's not just the resources. I think, I've always been somebody that frankly conforms to the female stereotype of being warm and cooperative. And I'm a girl's girl, like you said. And those things were always a disadvantage in the corporate world. And so speaking from that side of things, I find many women are finding that piece relatable, because a lot of what Lean In, and not just Lean In, but the main conventional wisdom, women at work talk about the struggles for women who break gender norms and are, outside of that stereotype, and their challenges, which are equally valid. But there's so many of us that have the opposite problem, which, we're warm and nurturing, which means we're not taken seriously at work. So why is discrimination against those traits okay, but, discrimination against aggressive women, sort of this national crisis?
And I love how you point out that if we begin to honor women and their unique strengths that they bring to the marketplace, then we will have a corporate culture that will be more enriched. And I just think that in terms of just age and just gender and how we address sexualizing women and teaching people how to handle power in the workplace is really important. Well, as I was very excited because I have a summer intern from the University of Maryland, Zachary Wilkoff, and he actually has been looking through your book, and I thought it was so important as a man who's about to enter into the workplace, the question that he had for you. So I'm going to ask that. Okay. He wanted to know, leaning in with your ambitions typically results in no progress. How does this radical new mindset of leaning out challenge the hierarchical system in order to best fit the needs of women in the workplace?
Okay, that's a great question. So I would first want to get clear about what lean out actually means, because it doesn't mean lean out of your job. It doesn't mean quit your job. It doesn't mean reduce your ambition. It doesn't mean to take your foot off the pedal at all. It simply means leaning out of anyone else's story of who you should be and what your career should look like. And the underlying message is defining success on your own terms. And, the word ambition was used, and I think that's also a big piece of this, because we talk about women don't have leadership ambition, but that's not at all true, because corporate executives are not just leaders in general. Like, there's so many different types of leaders. It's executive ambition, not leadership ambition. And ambition can be applied to anything. You can have ambition in motherhood, in fitness, in writing, in creativity. It's a big goal. So I think the message of my book is turn inward, be honest with yourself. Who are you? What do you want? Understand how your institutions are limited and where they can and can't fill your needs. And then it's about empowering yourself to fill the rest. So I think it helps women by, first of all, giving them permission to be honest, and then defining success on their own terms. And one of the things I talk about in the book is using well-being as the goal instead of winning.
I love it. I love it. Where can people find you? Your book is now available on Amazon everywhere, right? It's available everywhere. I'm going to have a link up to so people can find your book and purchase it and get it. Where can we find you? Do you have a website?
I do, marissaorr.com. Okay. And it'll be available tomorrow, but you can pre-order today, but you'll get it tomorrow, so there's no reason to wait. And I'm on Twitter at Marissa Orr.
Well, best of luck. This is such a great book and a great conversation to have, and it's really well written and very identifiable.
Thank you.
And I know women will see themselves in this book, whether they're leaning in, leaning out, or leaning sideways.
Thank you.
But for now, let's lean out, and we will see you soon.
It's actually Marissa Beth Orr, just so you know. I had to last minute change. It's on Twitter, Marissa Beth Orr.
Thank you.
We'll have a link.
Thank you.
Thanks.